is Kayla Koerting. I manage our fellows program here at USC, and we are honored to have 3 of our fellows here with us, and I cannot do their bios justice, so I'm going to let them introduce themselves and tell you just a little bit about their background and who they are. Ira, if you want to start.
Okay. As I understand it, correct me if I don't have it exactly right, each of you have thoughts about a political career, and that's why we're here. Is that sort of correct? Okay. All right. Let me just rapidly run through my political background. I started out, the first office I ran for, first of all, let me apologize for my hoarseness. I got over COVID 3 months ago, but this is what's left of it. I am assured that by and by it will go away, but I'm getting really impatient. Anyhow, so I ran for the Community College Board of Trustees. Then from that, I ran for City Controller of Los Angeles. From that, City Attorney of Los Angeles. Then District Attorney of Los Angeles. And then Attorney General of the state of California, and I lost, and that was the end of my political career. So people ask me, well, why did you get out of politics? And the short answer is I lost an election, which is most often the reason people leave politics, ultimately, unless it happens very, very early in your career. But there's more to my life than that, but that's all that's, I suppose, pertinent for the moment. So I'll leave it at that and then pass it on to Noelia.
Thank you.
Noelia.
Thank you, Ira. So Ira mentioned the community college district. That's actually where I started my higher education. I did it at night while I was working at Southern California Edison, which is the local electric utility, outside of the Department of Water and Power, which is the city of Los Angeles. And so I went from there where I was in corporate communications, and I got picked up by the mayor's office in Los Angeles in the 90s. The mayor, Mayor Koerting, recruited me to be his press secretary, which was kind of interesting because I told a group of students earlier today, I had no idea what a press secretary did, but I was really a good spokesperson, or I think somebody thought I was, and so that's how I ended up in the mayor's office. So I was with him for most of the 2 terms that he was in office, and then I became a deputy mayor toward the last 2 years, and then I ran the Democratic Convention Host Committee because in 2000 Los Angeles hosted the first political convention in Los Angeles since 1960, when President Kennedy was nominated by his party just a few hundred yards away from here at the now gone sports arena, and so it was historic for the city of LA. And from there I got picked up to work at the White House for First Lady Laura Bush when President Bush got elected. And as you probably know, that election was decided by the Supreme Court, so there was a transition period that was maybe 12 minutes. And in that short period of time, that was when I got recruited to be part of the president's team. And even though I had been a lifelong Democrat, you know, when you get a phone call from the president's office, you kind of answer and you say yes, and you make it work, and I absolutely did. I loved it. I loved my time in Washington, and then was there for about 3 years, and then I came back to Los Angeles and was at Univision as the VP of Corp Comm, and then I went back to the East Coast where I became a fellow at Harvard University, which I loved it so much I've been able to wait to stay there for 5 years after the semester fellowship, and then I've been back in Los Angeles for about 8 years since then, and I'm now the chief of staff at Metrolink. So public sector work primarily throughout my career, and I love public service, just like we all do, those of us who are fellows. So with that, we'll turn it over to you.
Well, hi everyone. I'm a lawyer by training, and I worked in the private sector for a while. But I always was really driven by wanting to serve, to make an impact. I was always interested in public policy questions, and so I wanted to be a criminal prosecutor, and I always had that in mind. I ended up doing that. I actually worked for Ira Reiner's office after he was no longer DA, but so I was a criminal prosecutor for a while. And then something that came my way, kind of out of the blue. I was involved in the community, but I got a call from somebody whom I respect, who said, Henry Waxman just announced he's not running for re-election. He was in Congress, by the way, for 40 years in Congress. And he's not running for re-election. You better run for that seat. I remember the text, you better run for that seat. And I thought to myself, run for Congress? Can I do that? I'm like, how do you do that? And I jumped in. It was also kind of last minute because he had announced during the election year, it wasn't known in advance, he announced the last day of January. So primary in June, right? And so I put a team together, hired a consultant, and ended up doing quite well. I finished, we have an open primary, top 2, right? So you get to vote for anybody regardless of party. And then the top 2 go to the general regardless of party. It could be 2 of the same party, so it's kind of nonpartisan that way. I ended up finishing first out of 18 candidates. And then in the general election, I lost to the guy who finished second, Ted Lieu, who's in Congress today. Now, I'll tell you, I learned a ton from that race. And this is generally, I think, a principle in life. You learn far more from the losses than the wins, from the failures than the successes. Always, in everything I've ever done, you really, so first of all, general message, not about public service necessarily, but generally, every time you have a loss or a failure of any kind, consider it a gift from God, that it's an opportunity to learn and adjust and be that much better and get a win next time. Like, it really is that way. Don't ever let a loss go to waste because they're the best lessons in life. And I'll tell you that my first foray into campaign politics was when I was in your seat as an undergrad. And here's a message, get engaged, get involved. I mean, I worked for Pete Wilson's Senate re-election campaign when I was junior, I guess, in college. And that kind of said, wow, this is really cool. And so the things you do as a student really do dramatically impact those opportunities you have later in life. And then I ended up, like Noelia, I ended up in appointed office. I was appointed by President Trump to serve as the U.S. Special Envoy on Anti-Semitism. So I led all U.S. policy combating anti-Semitism around the world. And I'll tell you, the reason they called me, and the only reason they know who the hell I was because of that congressional campaign. I mean, that put me on the map. And yeah, I had other things that they liked, the background. They liked the fact that I was a criminal prosecutor. I'm in the Army. I served in Iraq. They really liked that. Certainly the Trump administration liked law enforcement and liked military service. But that is all after I got the phone call, right? That's not what got me noticed. What got me noticed was my campaign. The fact that I ran a very strong campaign for Congress. And so there too, not only do you learn from your losses, but you just never know what opportunities and what doors get open because of the things you do. And so I ended up serving for 2 years, which was the most amazing thing. Like Noelia said, I mean, what a privilege to serve our country at a senior level and be involved in shaping major decisions of our country. It was the most incredible thing. And so I'm happy to talk about any of those things as you ask us questions.
Yeah, so now that we've got your kind of bios out of the way, tell us a little bit more about your journey and how mentors have played a role in that. What mentors have you had? How has that impacted you? And how do you recommend that students gain mentors?
Well, piggybacking a little bit on what Evan said about benefits that can accrue from even the most losing campaign. Now, he did very, very well when he lost. My journey is I did very, very poorly when I lost.
Not for DA.
Well, see, that's at the end of the line. We're talking about how it all begins. I had been a deputy city attorney in the city attorney's office right out of law school. I had no idea of politics at that time at all. And I went into criminal law, and for 10 years I was a criminal law defense attorney. But the city attorney of Los Angeles at that time, who had been in office for a good many years, decades, He was up for election, and some people that I was friends with in an environmental group that I became involved with, just not politically, but it was just something I was interested in. They said, well, why don't you run for city attorney? Well, the obvious answer should have been that I had no idea what the hell I would be doing, but that never occurred to me, that answer, so I ran. And I got, I think, 1 or 2% of the vote, which is about what I was entitled to. But along the way, and that's really the point of this, along the way as a candidate, you speak to various groups. And one of the groups I spoke to was the United Firefighters of Los Angeles, the Firefighters Union. And apparently I made a good enough impression upon them that come election day, they never, of course, endorsed me. They endorsed a viable candidate, of which I was not. That was the year that Tom Bradley was elected mayor. And the Firefighters Union had endorsed the mayor against the incumbent. And in return, the mayor gave them 3 appointments on the fire commission, a commission of 5 members. So I got a phone call at my law office asking me if I'd like to be a fire commissioner. Well, yeah. I mean, I had no idea really what the responsibilities were, but it sounded important, and why not? So I became a fire commissioner. Well, that's the first entree, if you will, into public life, coming out of running for a political office, no matter how poorly you do. If you do this and you do poorly, unlikely you could beat my record of doing as poorly as I did, measuring it somewhere around 1% of the vote in a citywide election. But once I was fire commissioner, you begin to network and make contacts, and then I ran for community college board as part of what they called the Democratic slate, and got elected. And then once, now that I'm actually holding elective office, then the next step I did, if you will, on my own, not as part of the slate, but I ran for city controller, then city attorney, district attorney. So the takeaway from that is that when you get involved in politics, no matter what it is you're doing, whether you're running for office or whether you're just working in a campaign, that you do not know what it is going to lead to. You don't know who you're going to meet tomorrow. And so all of that can lead to where you're going if you want to run for elective office. And I think the 3 of us, certainly I would greatly encourage and not be cynical about running for elective office. A late, great justice of the Supreme Court, Benjamin Cardozo, probably the greatest wordsmith that's ever sat on the United States Supreme Court, excuse me, he said, in speaking to a first-year law class, he said, the practice of law gives one a splendid opportunity for achievement. Well, in speaking about politics, I would say that as well, but I would put it much less elegantly. I would say politics is where the big fires are lit. And if you have the drive and the excitement to be where the big fires are lit, you have big ideas and big ambitions, there is nothing you can do in your life that gives you a greater opportunity for achievement. And that is, I think, I said borrowing on Justice Cardozo's language, the greatest recommendation that can be given to people who have in their mind possibly the thought of going into politics. Abandon the cynical view and understand that it will give you the greatest opportunity for achievement.
Thank you. I am going to take a little bit of a different spin on answering this question. Earlier today, I was talking to a group of students and other guests as part of Hispanic Heritage Month about my career, along with a Secret Service agent who was out here from Washington, D.C., and it was really quite fun. But when this question came up, I talked about the importance of mentors. And in my life, there are two men who made a huge difference in my life journey and my professional journey as well. The first one was when I was working at Southern California Edison. Now, I was always incredibly shy, very respectful of authority, didn't speak unless spoken to. That's kind of the culture that I was brought up in. And so I wasn't like, oh, put me in the game, I'll do whatever. I never was that kind of a person. But I ended up working for a man whose name is Don Sedan, and I started my work life as a secretary. And I went to college at night, community college, and then UC Irvine, and then I finished at Cal State Los Angeles. And so all that time I was working for Don Sedan. He was my supervisor. So of course, once you graduate from college, if you're in my station in life, once you get that certificate that says you are officially smart, then they start paying attention to your ideas and what you have to contribute. And of course, along the way, I was developing my confidence. And so Don was my mentor. There was nobody at that time, because obviously I'm a little bit older than some people in this room, that I couldn't go, okay, I'm going to go find a Latina who's going to be my mentor, or a Latino, or another person of color, or even a woman. So Don Sedan took an interest in me, and he encouraged me, and that's what really his mentorship was, being my cheerleader, being my supporter, telling me, think about this, maybe because you learned from my experience. And he was so instrumental in my college education and my entree into the professional levels of Southern California Edison. So flash forward when I got recruited by Dick Reardon after several years in corporate communications, and as his press secretary, I had been with him maybe 5 months, maybe 4 months, and I just felt like I was in over my head. As I said earlier, it was tough learning what a press secretary was, especially since I had never worked in politics before. But I was dedicated to him, and of course I was very headstrong about doing a good job. And so one day I literally went to him and I said, I don't think I'm cut out for this. I don't think I'm serving you well. And he says, you know what? And I had old school pink slip telephone messages that I had to return phone calls from reporters. And he goes, give those to your deputy. I'm going to take you somewhere. We're going to have a conversation. And I thought, okay. So he took me to the California Club, which I had never been to before. And it's a private club here in downtown Los Angeles. And as we're walking in, Gil Ray, a name you'll know, is walking out, very prominent attorney in Los Angeles. Gil's coming out, we're going in, and he, of course, stops to chat with the mayor, and the mayor introduces me to him. And I said, it's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Ray. Of course, I knew him from the media, and I'd seen him. I knew who he was. He had a terrific reputation. So they part ways. He goes out, we go in, and we go into the elevator, and the mayor says to me, I never want to see you do that again. I don't know what, I'm thinking, what did I do? And he says, you just called him Mr. Ray. He's Gil. You are as important as he is. Don't ever forget that. And it was just such a lesson in life that don't give away your power. And you're important. He's important too, but you're also important. So that doesn't mean be arrogant, but have the confidence of who you are and that you have a place in this world. And that to me, after we didn't even have the conversation of, I think I'm going to leave because I don't think I'm doing a good job for you. He just gave me so much confidence in that moment that we ended up having a whole different conversation. And I was, again, 3 or 4 months into it. I ended up staying with him for 7 years because I just believed in him because the mayor believed in me. So that's what you should look for, somebody who's going to believe in you just like you believe in your own dreams.
I love that story. That's a great story. I actually, it's so funny because I run into this all the time. Do I switch to first names?
Yes, I know.
Because you want to be respectful. It's not even being having a sense of where you also want to respect the
Absolutely.
achievement and title of the other person. And look, I'm in the Army, I still am.
Yes,
So
you have to
it's
do
like
that,
you don't use first names
Yeah.
with superiors, right?
Right.
And so, but I love that story. It's a great story. My political consultant in my campaign would use first names with elected officials who are very senior. And I said to him, don't you call him senator? He says, no. When you're a political consultant, you want them to know that you're either their consultant or you're potentially their consultant. He said, I don't use their titles. I use their first names. I'm like, oh my God, I can't even imagine. But the issue of mentors, I think, is critical. I've always sought mentors out. I think that I don't think there's a single achievement I've posted that hasn't come from somebody believing in me and going at great length to actually help me and help me get somewhere or achieve something. I'll never forget it. In the Army, the commander I had, or the supervisor, actually not technically commander, but the supervisor I had really took a liking to me. And he was a judge. I'm a reservist, right? So everyone has another job, right? So he was a judge. And he was very close with the district attorney at the time, Steve Cooley. And he said to me, then when I served in Iraq, when I got back from Iraq, I said, hey, they're hiring for the first time in like 6 years. It was a hiring freeze there. Finally, the DA's office is hiring. What do you think? And he's like, put in your name. I'm going to talk to Steve Cooley directly. He and I are very close. I'm going to talk to Steve Cooley about you. And I was shocked. I said, Steve Cooley? You're going to talk to Steve Cooley about me? I couldn't believe it. And he says, absolutely. And there's, not only did I get hired, but in my interview with the DA, the final interviews with the elected district attorney, and in my interview, first thing Steve Cooley said to me is oh, I know all about you. Alan talked my ear off about you. And it goes to show you, it was amazing the extent of which people believe in you and they're really willing to invest. Not everyone, by the way. Some people couldn't care less. And that's a type of person. But those who understand the importance of mentorship, usually they benefited from mentorship and they want to pay it forward, will go through great lengths to help you. And so seek those people out. I mean, fast forward, again, the administration called me about this appointment. And so I put my name in and I kind of said, all right, well, they called me, I'm going to wait. And then it turns out that I was one of the finalists, and I said, maybe I ought to actually work at this. Like I ought to try to get this instead of just kind of waiting. And another great mentor of mine, one of the leading philanthropists and political donors ever, Sheldon Adelson, you may know the name. Sheldon out of the Las Vegas Sands, Venetian and Palazzo and Marina Bay Sands in Singapore. $35 billion he was worth. He was a friend, and I called him up, and he ended up, first of all, in my political campaign, raising a ton of money for me, but here he ended up speaking to President Trump directly. And again, I couldn't believe it, but he said, I'll talk to the president. And that's kind of what put me over the edge for getting the job. Now, just as important, I'll say, I've benefited, but I've also always tried to mentor others. I've worked with hundreds of students. I was a national official of my fraternity, so I supervised, including this chapter here at USC, but all over Southern California. And I always said my top job in that role, which was a volunteer role, it wasn't a salaried position, I said my most important job is to recognize talent and help these great people get to wherever their potential will lead them. And so what I would say is not only seek out mentors, but be mentors. Even as students, by the way, you can mentor younger students. You can mentor kids coming up in the community, whatever. If you're in Big Brother programs, whatever. There's so many opportunities to really be to help inspire younger people to do great things. And I'll tell you, there's nothing more rewarding. As much as I've benefited from mentorship, it's nothing compared to how much of a reward I've derived from being a mentor and helping others, which is just the most incredible thing. By the way, when you have a mentor who believes in you, especially someone important in life, oh my God, it makes you be a better person, because God forbid should you disappoint them. I don't think anything scared me more
Exactly.
than disappointing those who believed in me and those who literally put their name on the line for me. I mean, who am I that they should put my, and so you say, I can't let this guy down or this woman down, right? So I can't say enough about mentorship. It's a great question. So.
And then quickly, before I open it up to questions, because I want to let the students have a chance to ask their questions, I just want to ask, kind of building off of that, we hear a lot about networking in politics, and no one takes a class in it. So what are your best practices for networking? How do you do it? How do you get your foot in the door? How do you gain those mentors? And then after that, we'll open it up to student questions so they can ask whatever they want.
Okay. Well, all right, network. Another way of asking, how do you get into politics? In the first instance, there is nothing easier in the world than getting into politics. It is the easiest thing in the world. It's unlike anything else. If, I don't know, your field, let's say, is you're studying advertising. Tomorrow morning, Friday morning, you could not walk up to an advertising agency, walk in the door, and have a job without even an interview. Just say, I'm here, I want to start working. I mean, it's a preposterous notion. But if you got a job because you have a degree from USC and they hire you at an entry-level position, the idea that within a matter of weeks or a few months, you would rise up to a position of significant responsibility, well, that's preposterous. I mean, you work your way up in a large business over a period of time before you reach a period of significant responsibility. All of that is turned on its head in politics. Tomorrow morning, you could go to any political campaign, walk in the door and say, I'd like to volunteer. You would not be turned away. Now, what job would you be given? Any damn thing that needs to be done at that moment. A friend of mine became later a very good friend, walked in the door, and this is not an unusual, I'm talking about, excuse me, a situation that is the most commonplace. He walked in, campaign, he happened to have an SUV. They needed to have some chairs picked up that somebody had donated for a campaign office. So he drove his SUV, loaded it up with the chairs, and brought it back. Well, he had an SUV. They had him do whatever happened to be needed at the moment. And he had a vehicle available. He drove the candidate somewhere. That led to, and we're talking about a period of weeks leading up to a campaign. So because he had a car, an SUV, he picked up chairs. Because he had a car and the candidate needed to be driven somewhere and there wasn't somebody available at that moment, he drove the candidate. Nothing more than getting in your car and driving somebody. Well, within a matter of a few weeks, he is now, he was first, second, then he became, before the campaign was over, head of what is called advance. He was taking care of all the advanced preparations for the candidate. Not only a very important job, but there ain't anything that's closer to get you right to the top. And there you are handling advance. That happens in every campaign. You walk in the door, your experience, if you have experience, it'll be put to use. But just walking in the door cold, there's something that needs to be done right now. And here you are, and you get that. And then because campaigns, unlike any other activity in life, there is a deadline. Now, we're lawyers, Evan and I. There are things like deadlines in court. There's always continuances. There's no such thing as a continuance for election day. It all comes to a total end when the clock strikes 12. And because of
Unless it's
that,
2000.
Exactly, I was thinking the same thing. There is one exception, 2000 presidential election.
well, just as an aside, though, I don't know, but you remember that, yeah, the counting ballots in Florida
Hanging
right
chairs.
up to December, and with the inauguration to be January 20th. The joke was that the inauguration was going to be a surprise party. Because we wouldn't find out. Nonetheless, I go back to saying, when the clock strikes 12, the counting wasn't over,
Right.
but the election was over. There wasn't anything that could be done other than to try to overturn an election.
Too soon.
So, because of that, in a campaign, everything is at warp speed. What needs to be done now needs to be done now by whoever is there to do it. So you can walk into a mayoral campaign tomorrow, a campaign of your choice. You will have a job the moment you walk in. That's not true in anything else in life. And you will have the opportunity, it may not happen, you may be handling the most ministerial of small jobs, and it never may go beyond that. But you will be operating at arm's length, in and out, in the most intimate type setting, with people at every level. Well, you can't go to General Motors, and the day you walk in, you are now at least bumping shoulders with, and then beyond bumping shoulders, actually having, if not a conversation, they talk to you and you talk to them as you're passing. That isn't going to happen in any business there is, other than it happens continually in politics. So the point is that getting involved, there are really two questions here. How do you get involved in politics? And then, should you ever get elected, what then? Well, getting involved, I just talked about that. But now, if you're going to actually run for office and get elected, and by the way, the idea of networking, that's how you end up running for office. The people that you're working with are all people who are involved in running campaigns, or they themselves are in campaigns, or they are people who support people who are in campaigns. And this becomes your world. And so, the fact is that most people, not all, it wasn't me, and it wasn't everybody, but most people that end up running for office, their first office, it's because they were a staffer working for an elected official. I have never done a statistical study. I would guess it's north of 75% of all people getting elected to their first office. It will be because they were a staffer to an elected official. So that's the easy part. Now the hard part. The hard part is now you're elected. And what then? There are two reasons people run for political office. The first reason is to do big things. Second reason is to be big. And the trick is understanding the difference between the two. And not, as you go along, BSing yourself as to which is which. And that's something that you can etch in stone or write on a 3x5 card and keep it someplace that you will see it often enough while you're in office. You get into office, human nature being what it is, for two reasons. Everybody does it for two reasons. To do big things and to be big. That's nothing to be ashamed of. That's great ambition about accomplishing great things and being great, being big. But don't confuse that, being big, with doing big things, which is the one thing that brings down many, many elected officials.
Well, drunk with power, it just, the wrong reason ultimately, and it ends up usually the same way. So I remember as Ira was talking, I was thinking about an event that I hosted when I was running the forum at the Kennedy School at Harvard. It was after the '08 election, and President Obama's campaign people, I know it was David Plouffe, I think David Axelrod was also there, but I just remember David Plouffe talking to the students. As you can imagine, it was a packed house. We had about 800 students there. And somebody asked him about getting involved in campaigns because they're thinking, I want to go straight to being a campaign manager, right? Or something at the center of the universe. And David Plouffe was very explicit in saying, lawn signs. You need to post lawn signs because that gets you close to the community. You end up becoming literally the face of the campaign. And it informs you for not only that campaign, but for other campaigns should you run for office. Because once you're the candidate, it would be good to know what all these other people do on the campaign so you have a better understanding because they are an extension of the constituents that you were trying to represent in office. So that's one tip. But when it comes to networking, I talked about this earlier today, and I will say it again as many times as I get the chance to talk about networking with students, is start, if you haven't started networking, which I'm sure you have, because you just do it by your relationships and your contacts, do it now. If there are students in this classroom with you, in this room with you now, get to know them. At least know their names, what they're studying, where they're from, because you're going to see them around campus. You're going to see them in class. And even if you don't, you're going to, at some point, maybe there's something you can learn from each other. And I also said earlier that the people that you already have relationships with or friendships with, here while you're on campus as a student, many of them are going to be lifelong friends of yours. And even if you don't hang out or do things in the intervening years, there's going to be a moment when you think, oh my gosh, I'm going to call her because she had an idea, or this is where she was from, and so she knows something about this, or she was studying this, or I heard that she got this great job. Or if you connect to people on LinkedIn, which is what we do, if you see a posting that you like that somebody did, like it, or even better, comment on it, because there's one thing that people like no matter what stage you get to in your life. You like it when somebody says to you, wow, great job on that post, great article, great opinion piece, really, really enjoyed it. And then that becomes a connection, and then you end up having a bigger network on something that maybe you hadn't even thought about. But it helps you in whatever career you choose. If you decide to go into politics, if somebody runs for office again, hey, I'm going to go volunteer on that campaign. You've just got, as Ira said, nobody's going to say no to you to go volunteer. And more than that, you're going to learn about how democracy works. First of all, you're going to register to vote and vote, but see how a campaign comes together. What does it take in the United States to get somebody elected office? And then, as Elan said, learn from that experience, whether you win or the second time around you come in second. That's always going to be something that's valuable for you.
Come in second, that's a euphemism. Silver medal.
Exactly.
If I asked each of you to make a list of the things that you do and that you've done, that you're involved in, my guess is you'll suddenly see that, okay, I have these different networks, because any single thing you do creates a network of people that you get to know, that you work with, that know you, and that form an opinion of you, hopefully a positive one, right? The more that you do, the more that you'll have different competing, there might be some overlap, but maybe without overlap, networks. And that is very, very important. It's, first of all, good for life, whatever you do, but if you run for office, that is absolutely key. Because to get elected, a lot of people have to get behind you. They have to certainly vote for you, but they have to support you, right? To get a lot of people to vote for you, you need a lot of people, maybe a smaller set, to actually get behind you and do something for you. Whether it's knock on doors or writing you a check, they've got to do something for you. And that's not easy. It's not easy to do. But if you have, competing networks, not competing, but I guess, complementary networks, that's really great. And so get out there. You know, you can't find yourself networks by staying in your, staying at home. You've got to get involved and get engaged. And you should do it because you really want to. You know, nobody dislikes more the feeling that they're being seen as a means to an end. I mean, it has to be genuine. Now the fact that you're in this program means that you have interests. You're thinking about public policy issues. There are things that you are really interested in doing. There are changes you'd really like to see in our country or our community or city or state, whatever. And so what I would say is start to get engaged in organizations. Start to just get out there and work. Political campaigns are certainly an option. I would highly recommend that, as Ira said, but any kind of network. So you have your high schools. You go to USC, that's 2, right? Are you involved in any organization at all, right? That would be 3. Are you in the Greek system? That would be 4. Have you run for student government, right? That would be something. So again, there's overlap, but they're really, potentially different networks. I'll tell you a story. So when I ran, for a congressional campaign, more so than for many, many other campaigns, you've got to raise a lot of money because you have to compete in the messaging sphere where your opponents are going to play, right? So in a congressional race, it's going to be TV, right? That's the big ticket item in terms of expense, especially in this media market here. And so you have to raise a lot of money. And so in the primary, here I am, I'm a first-time candidate. Who the hell knows who I am, right? And so I'm doing my best. I'm grinding through my networks. Right? I'm calling my friends. I'm calling the people I've worked with. I'm calling, with law school buddies, college buddies, fraternity brothers, whatever. I'm calling everyone I know. And people are writing checks, whatever. And then, you get to the first reporting period, and you want to see, well, am I going to be embarrassed? Because when they publicize the amount of money you've raised, one of the candidates ran for mayor, was the controller of Los Angeles, ran for mayor of Los Angeles, and had raised millions in her mayoral race. Another person is a state senator who has a whole constituency and gets really, and so you've got people who know how to raise money, and so you're nervous as hell. You're like, I'm not going to beat them in the first reporting period, maybe ever, but am I going to get close enough to look like to get coverage like, oh, this is a viable candidate, this is somebody who's serious, right? Lo and behold, first reporting period comes. I was pretty good. I was pretty high up there, actually, together with the former mayoral candidate and with the state senator. But you know who beat the hell out of all of us? This total unknown, young public defender. Now, public defenders, that's not a law firm where everyone's rich. It's a public defender, and he raised double what anyone else raised in the first reporting period. And so we all said, who is this guy? How did he do this? It turns out, you know how he did it? He, first of all, went to Harvard Law School. Second of all, he worked in tech for a while before he went to law school or before he went to the public defender's office. And C, his father is a producer, Hollywood producer. Think of those networks: Harvard Law School, Hollywood, and high tech. Those are the networks he mined. Now, does it matter that he was young with no experience? No, because people knew him. By the way, cool guy, nice guy. People liked him. He's nice, he's cool, he's presentable. Hey, why not? And plus, I owe him, or I owe his father something, whatever, and so why don't I write a check? And so he raised more than anybody else in this race. Now, what does that tell you? That tells you that the more networks you have, the more you can go to different people and say, I want your help. Now, are many people going to tell you no? Yes. Many people are going to tell you no. Even some of your friends, because they're not used to it. They don't do politics. I've never donated to a candidate. Fine, so what? But a lot of people are going to say yes. And so that's how you get networks. You go out, you get engaged, you do things in the community, you get involved, and then people not only get to know you, but they get to know what you're made of and what your passions are. That's what builds real support. When they know that you're not only a good person, but you really care about things, and you're a worker, you want to get out there, you want to make the world a better place. That's how you get people to follow you. And so the more things you do, and again, always be genuine. You always check yourself, because when you're in the political game, it's very easy to start to say, okay, I need to get to X. So now I'm going to be, I need to, make use of people. That's okay. You have to make use of people to a certain extent, right? We use our friends, we use our loved ones, right? Not in a cynical way, but we ask for help, right? We talked about mentoring before. But always be genuine. Always check yourself and say, am I doing this for the right reasons? Do I want to make a difference? And do I like these people? I've worked with elected officials, and anyone elected knows how to campaign, right? Otherwise they couldn't get there. Some of them just hated campaigning, hated it. The handshakes and the glad handling and all of this, they couldn't stand it, but they held their nose and they did it, and they did it well, and they did it enough to get elected because what they really wanted is to make an impact. Okay, I guess that's not the worst thing, but at the end of the day, you have to like people. And if you don't like people, then maybe you shouldn't be doing the politics thing at all. Maybe you should be doing something else, like be a pathologist, because then you don't have any beds, you don't have any live patients to, but you have to really like, I think you have to like people, and I think the most successful, those who really go far in life, not only as elected officials, but as corporate CEOs, or even as generals in the army, are those who really, they're good with people, they like people, they enjoy meeting people and finding out about them and getting to know and building a relationship. And if that's you, if you really like that dynamic, then politics is definitely a strong option for you. But if you hate it, you might be able to get elected, but it'll be such torture. Why even do it? Go make a lot of money and then donate to candidates who'll no, seriously, that you want to make an impact. Some people say, I would never want to run for office, but I give a lot of money to people who run for office so that I can invest in those leaders in whom I believe. That's okay. That's a great thing to do as well. So always check yourself and say, am I in this for the right reasons, and do I like what I'm doing? Also life is too short. You have to like what you're doing, or else you're going to be miserable. And you don't want that anyway.
Well, we only have a couple minutes left here for questions, and that's my fault because I was having too much fun listening to them, and I think they were giving such great information. But I want to pass it over to you. Does anyone have any questions for our three fellows that joined us today?
I have a question for Ira. Okay. I interned for the LA District Attorney last summer, and it was very different than I was expecting. One was there were a lot of women of color on my team. I worked for the Conviction Integrity Unit, and it was literally all women of color. And we had a lunch with the district attorney, and he was talking about his team, which was all women of color, so that was cool. And I think the biggest thing that surprised me, though, was how everything was just on paper. I wasted so many days searching for single cases, in files of rooms that are, on paper. And then I asked my supervisor, and then I got the opportunity to ask him why things weren't digitized. And he said, one, some things are digitized, which I was like, okay. And he said another thing was some people just like things the old school way, on paper. And then the third thing was that because of policies that they couldn't hire people to spend the time to digitize everything. And that they were limited by funding. So I was very, not satisfied with the answer. It's an obvious thing that we needed to digitize basically every file. And it just didn't seem like a priority. But also I just want to hear more about your time as the district attorney, since that's an interest of mine, and any thoughts you might have on that.
Well, okay. Let me just, not so much answer your question, just make an observation about why the office hasn't gone into the 20th century,
Right.
21st century, and barely finished up the 20th century. Let me tell you a very quick story, apocryphal story of a general who visits a military base. And when he visits, he is used to receiving a 21-gun salute. And he arrives at the base and does not receive a 21-gun salute. So he goes to the commanding officer at the base demanding an explanation. The explanation, the commanding officer then says, well, there are 10 reasons why we didn't give you a 21-gun salute. The first reason is we didn't have any ammunition. The general says the other 9 reasons don't matter. Okay. And, your case in the DA's office, I'm not there now, so I'm guessing, call it an educated guess. There may be 10 reasons why it isn't digitized. The first reason is that they don't have any funding for it. The other 9 reasons don't matter, and that's it. At budget time, it may be, it often is, that the Board of Supervisors, in doling out funding for a lot of other matters that in terms of running the county, the district attorney's office may not get what they believe to be sufficient funding. And so now they have a Hobson's choice. Well, do we digitize or do we increase or create a special unit that we think is really important? Well, digitize is kind of abstract, but if we can create a special unit here, or if we can increase it because the work we're doing there we pretty much like, you got Hobson's choice, they get the money. Typically, that's your answer. There are 10 reasons. After the first reason, the other 9 don't matter.
By the way, when I was there, the project to digitize old files started.
Oh, wow.
And they actually got through a lot of them, but they went from more recent to older, right? And so in fact, when I started, the files, it was the old filing system, and then they went to the new folders, which made it a lot easier to digitize. And so they actually got through a lot of the more recent cases. But you know, when you get further and further back, you're talking about warehouses.
Yeah, that's what he said.
It's a warehouse.
He was like, what you're looking at, you don't even know. Like,
Yeah,
he's like, we have warehouses full of paper.
I had to order old cases. You place an order and it gets sent. You have to wait.
Let me throw in something that is really tragic about that. Actually, was a dean here at USC, Jeff Cowan.
Oh, yeah.
Dean here at USC, and a very close, longtime friend, wanted to write a book on the history of Los Angeles. And so he came to me, and the history of any large city, in large part, could be told by the history of the district attorney's office. There's so much that would be involved in that that tells you about the history. So he came to me and I said, sure, I'm glad to help you out, Jeff. Checked, well, there is no history in the DA's office. All the records were destroyed from, I can't recall now, up to a certain date because they ran out of space. And everything is physical, space is everything. And it reached a point, some district attorney, well before me, decided, well, the best thing to do here is to destroy all these records that we have no need for. Wow. So a large history of Los Angeles is gone.
That's tragic.
Well, I know we're a little over time. Does anyone else have any questions for our fellows before we wrap it up?
I just kind of have kind of a quick question. Like a lot of people like I know and like my family, all like after undergrad went into law school. And I guess just kind of a professional question, do you think it's a worthy investment? Because, obviously my parents are, helping me pay, and, I don't want to have to burden them with an additional 3 years of schooling, but on the other hand, there's a, significant, potential professional or career benefit to law school. I guess if you guys could just give your, your thoughts on law school and if the pros out there.
Well, Evan, you want to go first?
Sure. I think that a lot of people go to law school because they don't know what else to do. And I don't know that I would recommend that. 3 years is a long time. It is a lot of money. Even if you're not paying, your parents are paying, still it's a lot of money. And at the end of the day, I think that time would be better spent doing something else. I mean, if what you really want to do is you want to be an entrepreneur or whatever, I don't know that that's a good, 3 years is a good use of your time. On the other hand, I will say that studying law is incredibly valuable. First of all, learning the law and then being a lawyer has all kinds of benefits to it. First of all, in almost anything you do in life, you operate within a legal framework. And understanding that, even if you're at a point where you're fortunate enough to have lawyers working for you, to understand what they're doing and to really know the issues is absolutely invaluable. I'll tell you, for example, a statistic I heard. I don't know if this is still true, but at a time when it was the merger and acquisition craze on Wall Street, I was a New York lawyer, I was a corporate lawyer in New York, a majority of investment bankers on Wall Street had JDs. You might think, wow, why would that be? Well, because again, it's so valuable, it's so beneficial for all kinds of things that you might do. Then the other thing is, it's nice to have a profession to fall back on. You know, I mean, business school is great. By the way, if I had to do it again, I'd get a joint degree. I wish I hadn't. But if you go to business school, you get a lot of contacts and quite a bit of knowledge maybe. Go to law school, you get a profession. It's very different. And that's not a put down for business school. Again, I wish I had done a joint degree, but having a profession and being a professional is incredibly valuable. I mean, it comes with stature. It is a fallback. I mean, look, you know, if you don't intend to be a lawyer and you're not working as a lawyer and you need a job, you're not going to be a very high-end lawyer, but you could always do something in the law, right? You could always, so you have a fallback job if you need it. But regarding stature, let me tell you a story. So one of my friends, actually a fraternity brother of mine here at USC, I didn't go here, but he went here. His father is one of the founders of California Pizza Kitchen. And I got to know, I was very close with the son, so I got friendly with the father as well. And the father and his partner, the two founders, both lawyers, then they were both prosecutors together. And then they were criminal defense attorneys. They opened a firm, and then they opened the first CPK on, Beverly Drive, right? And the rest is history, as they say. So I asked him, the father of my friend, I said, you ever miss the law? He said, nope. I mean, he said that very quickly. By the way, you should know, job satisfaction among lawyers is incredibly low. Not prosecutors. Prosecutors love what they do. Judges, for the most part, love what they do. But lawyers and law firms, for the most part, are not very happy. There are a lot of reasons for that I won't get into. It's beyond the scope here. But something to know and be warned about. So he said very quickly, he said, nope, not at all. I said, I laughed. I said, so are you sorry you spent all that time? Are you sorry you went to law school? And this was a very interesting answer, because this I hadn't thought of in terms of the virtues of the legal profession. And at the time I was a lawyer, right? So I certainly had a sense of the virtues of being a lawyer. But this I hadn't thought of. He said, oh my goodness, no. We never could have done what we did had we not been lawyers. He said, go try to raise money for a restaurant. He said, you know how many restaurants fail? People go to people to raise money for a business venture, a restaurant, people laugh at you. He says, but they didn't laugh at us. They didn't laugh at us because we were lawyers, we were attorneys with a track record. And people took us seriously. They were willing to pony up on as risky a venture as you could get, opening a restaurant. And that, I never forgot that answer. And that says a lot about stature. Now, in fairness, these are two people who, it's not that they just had JDs, right? They were federal prosecutors, so that, they had a real track record. But it goes to show you, it's something to consider. To have a profession, to have stature, it helps you do all kinds of other things. But again, it depends on, do you resonate with the subject? Might you want to be a lawyer? Is your career path something that would benefit from a law degree? Because if not, again, I wouldn't spend 3 years and a lot of money doing that.
So we started late and we're about to end late, or we are ending late. So Ira or Noelia, do you want to add to that really quickly before we close off?
I would quickly add, I'm not a lawyer, but I have 2 lawyers in my network, so I'm really happy about that. If I ever need one at 2 in the morning. But what I would say, and I picked up on a little bit on your question, this sense of, your parents' expectations, or your feeling, your responsibility, and you're to be commended for that. And that's a heavy thing to think about. So as Elan was saying, if it's not something that you really feel you want to do, or anybody, not just you, if it's not in your gut or in your heart, then think twice about it and maybe just take the time to think about what is it that does move you, and then if you have to take a gap year or whatever, do that and explore other things that are, you know, inspiring to you. And then you might come back to it, but you might not, and if you don't, you've at least, you know, considered it. But I just want to commend you for, it's a tough question, especially, you know, giving familial expectations, and I think your parents would be very proud of you for that.
Just one very brief observation. Law school can be very difficult on the mind. Law school is different than any other field of study that you may consider. So you do not want to go to law school unless you really are mentally prepared, emotionally prepared, to really delve into something that initially is going to be difficult. Not difficult your second and third year, but at least half of your first year is going to be very difficult, because what you are learning in law school is not the law. And traditionally, they like to say that to students the first day of law school, but it is true. You are not learning the law, though you will flunk if you don't know the law. You are learning how to think and analyze like a lawyer, and that's not a joke line. Excuse me again. So there is a strong reason to go to law school. It is simply the very best training of the mind that you can get in academia. And you will come out, smarter is the wrong word, but essentially, functionally smarter because of the way you can analyze. Now, whether you practice law or just have your degree and you go off into something else and the degree is beneficial, that's a side bar. The most important reason, the most important reason you want to be a lawyer. But if you don't want to necessarily be a lawyer, a strong reason for going to law school is for the intellectual vigor of training that you get in law school that is different than any other academic pursuit.
Thank you guys all for coming. It was really amazing to have Ira, Noelia, and Elan here to talk to us. And if you have any additional questions for them, you can always reach out to the center and I will field the questions and forward them on. But thank you all for staying a little bit late. I know we were delayed starting at the late end, but thank you, and I hope you enjoyed and have a great rest of your week.